Thank you, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. I know you're expecting a celebrity, but you got me. When you stand behind the board over here, it feels like you're at Wrigley Field or something. You should be putting the runs up for every inning, I think, the way it goes down. I want to thank Eric, Stacy, Aaron, the whole crew here for having us. Wonderful to be here. I'm here with my colleague, Kaylee Theriault, who you'll meet in a little while. She's going to be handling the executive panel. Also here is Sherry Fry, who does thought leadership for our wellness segment at NIQ. And you're going to be hearing about that tomorrow. And also our good friend Danny Brager, formerly with NIQ, he's also with us as well. So we have a nice crew assembled, and we're going to be here for the entire event, and we're really excited about it. So I'm going to jump into kind of a quick overview of some of the mega trends that we see going on. And the way I'm going to do that is to talk a little bit about the consumer, because ultimately that's probably the most important part of what's going on in the beverage alcohol business. And we're going to get into some of the numbers, but I also recognize probably don't want to get too crazy with too many charts, so we'll be careful with that. And then we want to get a bit of an understanding of where the Central Coast performance is. So, you know, for me, I've been in the beverage alcohol industry for about 20 years now. Before that, I was in pharmaceutical. So, yes, always drugs and alcohol with me. That's absolutely correct. But the interesting thing, I think, especially in the last 20 years, is the real mega changes that are going on, the high-level macro issues that we see in the beverage alcohol industry. It has gone from being something that's nice to know about, that we would put into our 3-year or our 5-year plan. And I've never seen this before. I've never seen these macro trends be so important right now, today. And they are moving quickly and they're moving efficiently. And if you don't take them into account with strategic planning, with M&A, with any of the work that you're doing in the wine industry, you're probably going to get passed by. We used to have the luxury of putting them off to the side and saying, you know what, these things matter, but they matter only in the long term. Now, I've got 8 put up here on the slide and we're going to talk about some of these today. We actually have material coming out on all of them from our Thought Leadership series. But I did not characterize here some things that even rise above this. I'm not getting into like global warming or geopolitical strife or AI. Now, we know those things impact as well, but they impact in a slightly different way. But these 8, we feel, and we're going to be characterizing them during the course of the year as well, but these 8 really come forward in terms of planning, both strategic and tactical. So one of the first stops that I want to make is talk a little bit about demographics. Demographics for generation viewing kind of break out the way you see it here for the population as well as for wine consumption. And so one of the things that you see right away that's pretty important is an understanding of the wine consumer or the wine shopper and where they fall in terms of age group. And I think it's really pivotal to understand that there's a couple of different places that are really going to matter. And one is going to be on the recruitment end. So I'm not the first one to say it's not going to be easy to recruit Gen Z. That's probably the biggest, talked about thing right now where everybody wants to figure out what's going to happen with Gen Z. A lot of Gen Z are simply not consuming alcohol. But that's okay. Remember, not all Gen Z has turned LDA 21 just yet. So there's a lot more to come for where Gen Z is going to end up. But it's worth noting where People in my generation, for example, still being a really prime space as far as recruiting wine drinkers. I'm not in this picture. I know you're searching. You see sitting back there? I'm not the one knitting. But the grain of America is very real. And we have some huge numbers coming forward for what we think is going, well, not we think, what we know is going to be a generational influence. As we get older, we tend to have more net worth, but we tend to have less disposable everyday income as a population. So this is going to be a real issue going forward for wine consumption, or the affordability of wine. But we're going to talk about a real sweet spot that exists for this and how we think this could be really pivotal going forward. You know, we see probably a lot of back and forth every day in the press about what people are thinking about the economy and what they tell us. What I would say is that, you know, as far as confidence is concerned, the consumer is fairly confident. There's some volatility to that confidence, though. And that's something that we are always watching for, we're always tracking. And we try to look under the hood and kind of understand, why are they confident? So let's say you're a confident consumer and you've been spending and everything is looking pretty good. The problem exists that how are you paying for that confidence? You know, so many consumers really wanted to get back out there after COVID. I did, everybody did. Wanted to go to events, wanted to make sure that they were really able to socialize again after the lockdown period. But the scary part is here that had to get paid for some way. And the debt is approaching $18 trillion. A lot of that in credit cards and revolving debt, but in other debt terms, it's building as well. And what we see is a confident consumer probably enjoying the party, but starting to wear out a little bit. So we're all convinced now that inflation is under control. We hear that all the time. That's great. However, the lingering effects of inflation are very real, and it's taking its toll on a lot of people. We have those that are thriving, of course, but we also have a lot of consumers that sort of got left behind as the economy has moved forward. So that, I would tell you, when you're doing planning, any kind of recruitment strategy that you have, any kind of new shopper strategy that you have, you really need to take into account the fact that some people are just not going to be economically able to keep up and be recruited. One of the other key factors that we mentioned, one of the key macro factors, is this idea around moderation. And when we have these discussions, it's worth reminding everybody that from the tracking that we're doing, we see about 94% of the non-alcohol purchases, which is part of the moderation routine, coming from people who are drinking alcohol. And it's amazing to me, a lot of conversations get started on this and people say, well, I assume whoever's buying non-alcohol products doesn't drink. Well, it's absolutely not the case. Some certainly are doing that, but there's other moderation techniques that are also in place here. And I would also tell you there's a lot of other mindful drinking aspects. So people are really starting to take into consideration where the product came from, what's the transparency involved, and in short, how can I be part of buying a brand that I really believe in? And so that's really key here. When this happens, it's really interesting to me to watch what brands do. Because brands will morph, they'll change, they'll come to the table with all kinds of new attributes. And we could put, I don't know, we could put 100 brands up here that have decided to go in unique directions. But I wonder, and I would offer up to you, I wonder if maybe we're developing some confusion. We're developing a little bit of confusion for consumers. We're developing a little bit of confusion for shoppers. We are building some brand affinity here, though, with these brands that were typically center-of-store brands, non-alcohol brands, who have decided to turn into the alcohol industry. And when they do that, wonderful. You have that brand recognition, and you may be taking some of those consumers along with you. But what I find really interesting is now we have alcohol brands coming back the other way. So brands that started typically as an alcohol product are now moving back and offering a non-alcohol product. So I'm just waiting for the hard lemonades to come out with a non-hard lemonade, which I think is lemonade, right? I think we'll see it we'll see some teas coming out that way as well. So this is a really important element, also has to have consideration into any kind of the brand planning. Another macro trend that I mentioned was portability. This is where RTD has really gotten a leg up. Our RTD, whether it's a beer, wine, or spirits item, has portability written all over it. Beer also has that portability. Wine has that capability, and we're seeing it demonstrated in all the different kinds of packaging styles. I would say more of that needs to keep happening. People expect that kind of capability out of their brand. They love to see new packaging, new styles. When my background is Coors Brewing, Bacardi, and LVMH. So I've done the luxury thing and I've done the beer thing. And I will tell you, especially on the beer side, they pay attention to this portability aspect, and they really hone in on it by usage occasion. So it's incredibly important, got to be part of the planning cycle. For those of you that aren't real familiar with NIQ, I just want to offer up to you the next couple slides that I'm going to go through have some purpose to them, but they're based on material that we get from retail scan data. So the way this works is we get the data from the food, drug, mass, convenience channels, and the liquor channel as well. And we take the census data and we mix it with sample data that we get. So we might get, sample liquor stores in a particular region or state, and we build that up to be these total numbers that you're going to see. So please check with us if you're a little unsure about where some of the data points come from. But the first stop I wanted to make was kind of to show you where the value and the volume is right now for beer, wine, and spirits. And I listened to some of these publicly traded calls, and the number one question that analysts are asking the CEOs on these publicly traded calls is, where's the volume? Okay, you took price, you did a great job building revenue, and this is how cruel Wall Street can be. They're saying, hey, we got to see where the volume is because we don't believe you can hang on and we don't believe you can take any more price. So that's really something that has to be part of the consideration mix here, is you have to kind of understand from a strategy standpoint, which way are we going to go? How far are we going to push the needle on price and try to build some value? But we also can't let the volume go. It's the perfect economic equation. So the numbers I just showed you, let's take a different view of them. And when we switch the lens a little bit, and now we're looking at beer, wine, and spirits, but we pulled out all the RTD products. So the beer, the FMB, the seltzers, the wine RTDs, and the spirits-based cocktails, all pulled out and put into their own mega category. We think this is going to be kind of the way of the future, that we're going to have to look at the business. We think that this fourth category really is going to be more of a view that retailers want. And I can tell you for sure it's a view that retailers want because we talk to them. And when we talk to them, especially in the convenience and the liquor channel, here's what they say. They tell us, look, the consumer doesn't know what the base of this product is. Why are you dividing it out? Why are you parsing it out to me in all these different subcategories? Just call it what it is. And as a matter of fact, some people call it the flavors category. They don't even call it ready to drink. But I just wanted to show you the differential here, and you get a sense of understanding how incredibly important RTD really is. Now, let's switch gears and move over to the Central Coast. Central Coast wines, as we were hearing earlier, have really proliferated in the data set that we have. They've proliferated with and resonated with so many consumers and continue to do so. And you can sort of see a bit of the size that's involved with the region and the trend that's been going on. But I kind of like to see something where we compare it to some other regions. So when you take a look at some other fairly large global regions, you get a bit of a sense of what that comparative nature is. And Central Coast, very, very big region, of course, but not all of these, I would say, would be a fair comparison, but it kind of gives you a sense of scale of where Central Coast falls. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what drives Central Coast and what I think are some of the real proactive possibilities here. And one of the stops that I want to make in trying to explain that is talk a little bit about price. Now, with regards to price, one of the things that is so really mission critical important in wine. Remember, we were talking about moderation. We were talking about people who might not be drinking as much as they used to be drinking. Well, what are they doing? And one of the things that we see them doing is drinking better quality or stepping up a little bit. I don't like the term trade up and trade down, because that's not really how consumers consume, and it's not how they shop. They have repertoires. Each one of you has a repertoire in beverage alcohol that you'll consume. Your repertoire is probably a little different than the general population based on your interest in the wine business, but I would offer to you, you have a repertoire. And so based on usage occasion, that's how you make changes in what you consume. And so I might have a super premium wine in my repertoire, but I can't either afford nor do I want to drink that every single day. I will pick the moments that I want to have that particular product. So what we see is kind of around this $20 mark to be really pivotal and really key. We see that growing. And it's important to kind of understand that, not just because of what the numbers say, but because it creates a threshold for consumers. And that threshold is really important. Even if you're at $23.99, $24.99, that's okay. On promo, if you can get back over $20, and retailers are really good at doing this, you're crossing that threshold in a very positive way instead of in a negative way, which would be the frontline price increase. So how does Central Coast play out on this? And I would tell you that's a really, really good story here for Central Coast. You can see at each one of these price point breaks, take a look at the blue bar, that's Central Coast, compared to the rest of the wine industry in the gray bar. And you see the core capability here. It's exactly what I was just talking about, where that premiumization routine has really set in with shoppers, and it's really pivotal. I think this has all kinds of capability around it, and I think this is something from a planning perspective. If I was doing the brand planning on a Central Coast wine, this is exactly where I would head to make sure I was developing products that were going to feed into this cycle. One of the other areas that we can track is all the aspects of anything that's on the package or on the label. Now, there's not a lot of wines, and I realize how difficult this is to actually pull together an organic wine. I have huge respect for that. But there are some that are labeled and marked as organic wine. So anything that actually says that on the product, we're able to capture here. And I think that there is a Central Coast capability and adaptability for consumers to understand the organic segment of the business here. And it is trending very well. And that's the whole point I'm trying to make. We can argue all day about what organic is and it isn't. And, organic influences, but the point of the matter is it's actually trending above the rest of the wine industry here in the Central Coast, which I think is great. I don't really think I could have a discussion here unless I at least mentioned direct-to-consumer. NIQ doesn't track direct-to-consumer, but we have a lot of partners, and there's also a lot of stuff in public domain that tracks direct-to-consumer. Remember, with these numbers, you're not seeing product that is being sold from tasting rooms and other situations where the consumer can take the product with them. But what I would say to you is direct-to-consumer is having some of the same struggles that the retail world is having and having some of the same struggles that the on-premise world is having as far as finding that right product mix. And so part of what goes into the issue here is sometimes that need for immediacy. You know, a lot of shoppers, all the shopper work that we do, a lot of the shoppers report back that I have to have that product right now. I didn't plan for it. I'm having a party, I'm having to get together, I'm doing something that necessitates me having that wine at home right now. Because what we see in the numbers is for wine, about 77, 78% or so of wine buyers, whatever they buy as a planned purchase. And so that's really mission critical. It means they're walking in the door and they understand exactly what they're looking for, and that's what they're going to come away with. And one of the key reasons for that is it tends to be consumed in very close proximity to purchase. And so in some cases, DTC doesn't necessarily supply that. If we took a look at some of the brand families, and this is for Central Coast, by the way. It's not marked on here, but this is for Central Coast. If we take a look at the brands that were the top 10 brands 4 years ago, and take a look at the top 10 brand families now, you see a lot of similarity. You see a lot of the same brands. And I recognize with some of these brand families, they're not all Central Coast. We're just using this to indicate what the brand family actually is, but we realize that some of the varietals may not be Central Coast orientated. But what I wanted to point out to you is as much as things change in the brand world, as much as brand development changes, a lot of it does stay the same. People have brands they know and they trust, and they really enjoy coming back to them. Again, the whole repertoire issue is very real, where consumers want to have that faith in the product and they love to know what they're getting. It's really, really critical. The last stop on our adventure here this morning is one of the questions, and Kaylee and I get this question with every conference we go to. People say, what about cannabis? Cannabis, cannabis, cannabis. I was at a conference not too long ago that had a trade show, and the number of THC products, RTDs mostly, the number of hemp-derived products is just exploding. It's such a burgeoning area. However, when you talk to most of these manufacturers, what they'll tell you is they're getting ready. Now, a couple of things I want to say here. First of all, NIQ does not track cannabis sales just because it's not legal everywhere. And so we haven't really gotten into that, but you can't ignore it. So I wouldn't pay so much attention to the survey numbers yet on cannabis and wine drinkers. I'd be really, really careful with that because there's nothing conclusive there yet, and a lot of it has to do with sample and where people are actually able to consume cannabis legally and where they're not. So this becomes a bit of a numbers game. I really don't look at that. But what I wanted to talk to you about today based on this is the usage occasion. Look at these 3 usage occasions. They map pretty closely to what's going on as far as what wine consumers want as well. So what you really have to think about here is making sure that you're putting the best foot forward for these usage occasions. Like I said, I wouldn't get wrapped around the numbers and say, oh my goodness, you know, that guy on stage yesterday said, we're going to lose all our business to cannabis. Not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying there's a new competitor, well, not a new anymore. There's a competitor in town that's looking to steal those same occasions. And that's going to happen. It's also going to happen with RTD because these are wind down moments. These are not high energy moments. These are not, high energy club environment type moments. So this is something that is absolutely evolving, and the advice I would give in this particular area is pay attention to what the consumption moment actually is. So let me wrap up here for you and kind of give you a sense of what I think is going to be really important, especially in the next 12 to 18 months. I can't say this enough. We're really trying to change the way we talk about macro trends. And it's not safe anymore to assume that those are going to be important a lot further downstream. They're important right now, today, and the evolution is here. We don't get a pass on this. We can't wait for anything else to come down the road because it's already here. And things like demographics, we showed you how some of that's changing. Moderation, oh my goodness, it's just thriving. It's no longer dry January. It's a lifestyle now. And so it's really got to be discussed in that way. Ready to drink, if you're not connected with us, please get connected with us on LinkedIn or however you want to do it. But we're going to have some new work coming out on ready to drink and how ready to drink impacts beer, wine, and spirits separately. So we're going to be doing some thought leadership work that's going to be available. That's going to actually call out how that fourth category looks right now and where we see that evolving to. That is an entry point for a lot of consumers, and we don't want to forget that. Talked a little bit about inflation. We also can look at the core drivers report that we did back in Q4 for inflation. Happy to share that. But it's really one of those got to be careful who's been left behind routines. And that's something that's really, I think, going to be worth paying attention to, especially as we all think inflation has settled down. And then, as I mentioned, what we're doing in terms of strategic planning's got to change. If you've got a strategic planning routine in place, I would tell you, you might want to take a quick look at it, maybe a longer look at it, and decide if you want to make some changes to that based on some of the things we've been talking about here today. I don't think we have the luxury of doing things the same way. I am very bullish on the wine industry. I really think it's got fantastic potential, but it's going to have to address some of these issues that we're talking about going forward, and there are certainly a lot of watch-outs, but optimism comes to me, from the standpoint of the consumer still being tied in to the wine business, and so many people wanting to understand and love coming to the wine tastings and love coming to the wineries and spending time. It's a cultural event, and it shouldn't be ignored. And I love it, and that's why I'm very bullish on the industry going forward. So with that, I hope that was helpful. We've got all this material available to you, of course, and I'm